32. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight. A Pakistani man is now blamed for spreading initial misinformation about the Southport attack. What does this mean for those who blame the far right? And
priority and the first step is to set up the new Border Security Command and to increase our law enforcement.
Is Yvette Cooper lying about who Labour will deport? Plus,
I don't want to increase taxes on working people and our commitment not to increase national insurance, income tax or VAT. We stand by those commitments.
Big scandal here, as Labour borrowed £3.1 billion more than expected last month to pay off the unions. Also, foreign aid madness. You paid for a Chinese female opera. And more people think that killer nurse Lucy Letby might be innocent, including ex-Tory ministers. Look, what's going on here? Plus,
Stop the rip! Stop the rip now!
find out what happened to those drug smugglers. On my panel tonight is the director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, political consultant Suzanne Evans, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Oh, and who said the Germans don't have a sense of humour? Get ready, Britain. Here we go. British taxpayers starve, so their money can go towards foreign aid. Next.
Good evening. It's 1 minute past 9. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. Tonight, it's been confirmed 5 bodies have now been found inside the wreck of the luxury yacht that sank in the storm off the coast of Sicily. That's in addition to the one found shortly after the disaster on Monday. The bodies of British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch and his daughter Hannah are thought to be among them, but formal identification has not yet taken place. Sicily's Civil Protection Agency says 4 bodies were recovered from the super yacht this afternoon, but 1 body remains inside the wreckage. This takes the death toll so far to 6. 1 person is still missing and the search for them will resume tomorrow. Police have named a man killed in his own home by his pet XL bully. The victim was David Daintree, who was 53 years old, and specially trained officers are supporting his family. Emergency services were called last night to a house at Ashley Court in Accrington, Lancashire, after reports of a dog attacking somebody inside. The XL bully was shot dead by police, who claims the dog still posed a significant risk to others. An investigation is ongoing. Police have launched a murder investigation after a delivery driver was involved in a collision during an attempted theft of his van. West Yorkshire Police said officers were called last night following reports of a man found seriously injured in Wortley and Leeds. Officers found the victim unconscious, with members of the public trying to help him. He was given emergency treatment by ambulance staff but was pronounced dead at the scene. And 4 people who died in a house fire in Bradford, including 3 children, have been named by West Yorkshire Police as 29-year-olds Bryony Gawith, Destiny, who was 9 years old, Oscar, who was 5, and Aubrey Birtle, just 22 months. A murder investigation has been launched after the incident, which happened in the early hours of this morning on Westbury Road. A 39-year-old man was arrested at the scene on suspicion of murder and taken to hospital with critical injuries. Superintendent Lucy Ledbetter believes the fire was started on purpose.
Whilst inquiries are at their early stages, we believe that the fire was started deliberately and this incident was domestic related. I would appeal to anyone who was in the Westbury Road area at the time of the incident who has CCTV or doorbell footage to come forward.
The Home Office has outlined plans to tackle illegal immigration, including deploying 100 new intelligence officers to target people smuggling gangs. The Home Secretary's also outlined plans for the next 6 months to achieve the highest rate of removals of those who don't have the right to be in the UK, which includes failed asylum seekers. The government says it'll also reopen immigration removal centres in Hampshire and Oxfordshire, which will add 290 beds. But the Conservatives have said that Labour were not serious about tackling the people smugglers or stopping the boats. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. Now it's back to Patrick.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
You have been sending foreign aid to parts of the world that are richer than parts of the UK. British taxpayers have funded anti-congestion measures in Kuala Lumpur, flood prevention in Mexico City and an all-female Chinese opera in Shanghai. Kuala Lumpur is home to the second tallest building in the world, the Merdeka 118. That cost $1.5 billion to build. They have got their own money over there. Some of the stuff you've been paying for is absolute guff. You have spent £202,000 helping to foster dialogue among local craftsmen in Shenzhen province in China. That's according to research by the Institute of Economic Affairs. Another 200 grand has been splashed on fostering creative citizens in China through co-design and public makerspaces. What the heck does that even mean? For context, some of these places have the same GDP per capita as places like Swansea or Walsall. Do you not think that maybe taxpayers in those areas might prefer the cash themselves? China has sent a robotic craft to Mars, and yet we're still sending them foreign aid, while pensioners in Britain are now coming to terms with the fact that they might not be able to heat their own homes this winter. Now, apparently, in 2022, we sent £353 million to the Taliban stronghold of Afghanistan. How's that going? Lovely stuff. As far as I can tell, there are 2 main points behind foreign aid. Firstly, soft power. Well, again, How's that going? The Taliban hate us, and China are eyeing up an invasion of Taiwan. In fact, outgoing US President Joe Biden secretly upped America's preparedness for nuclear war after China added 90 nuclear warheads in 1 year last year to take its total arsenal of world-destroying weapons to 500. Please tell me again why they need our money. The other aspect of foreign aid is stopping people fleeing their own countries to come here and be refugees or asylum seekers. How is Calais doing? Yeah, it's not happening, is it? In the past, we've given money to an Ethiopian girl band called Yegna. We gave millions to Kenyan rainmakers. But that was in the past, OK? We have to look at what we're doing now. And I wonder whether, at a time when hard-working Brits are really struggling, and our new Labour government has just borrowed £3.1 billion more than expected to help fund public sector pay rises, is it really OK to be sending so much money abroad for highly dubious projects? Let's get our thoughts from our panel now. I am joined by the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. I have also got political consultant Suzanne Evans and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Mark, I'll start with you on this. Why on earth are taxpayers in places like Walsall and Swansea sending money to fund an all-female opera in Shanghai or wherever it was?
It's a very good question, Patrick, to which I don't have a very satisfactory answer. It is a colossal waste of money. I mean, I think, to add to your monologue at the start, there is a third potential call on foreign aid, and that's if there's a one-off humanitarian disaster.
Yes.
You know, some ghastly flooding somewhere or whatever, and we're the only people, or we're some of the only people who can get in food and running water and the rest of it. But this is a disaster. It's often been said that foreign aid budgets are a way of taking money from poor people in rich countries and giving it to rich people in poor countries. And that seems to be the evidence of some of these schemes here. One note of caution, however, although I would end this madness, I was looking into the amount of money we've given China. It has fallen. I think it was 8 million last year. I don't think we should have given them a penny, but £8 million is only enough to keep the NHS going for slightly less than 20 minutes. So let's not pretend if we killed all this off, we've balanced the budget.
I completely understand that, but £8 million might go quite a long way in Redbridge, for example.
Yeah,
and that's kind of my
absolutely. And China, why are we sending any money to China? It's one of the wealthiest countries on the planet. They've got $300 billion in UK gilts. They've got $900 billion in UK Treasury bonds. They're one of the wealthiest countries on the planet. There's absolutely no need for that. And Mark's absolutely right. You know, none of us wants to take any money away from emergency aid, from immunisation programmes, things like that. But the fact is that only accounts for about a fifth of the foreign aid budget. The other thing that needs to be remembered is up to 50% of this foreign aid goes in administration, it goes in governance, it goes to even non-governmental organisations who are actively working against the kind of political achievements of our own country. It's an absolute nonsense. We absolutely must keep emergency aid going, supporting some of the poorest people in the world. But the fact is, and the other thing that I think I find really upsetting, is that it's not made any difference to their quality of life. So you look at countries like Pakistan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, they get a huge whack of the foreign aid budget, but it's done nothing to improve their GDP per capita at all.
This is the other aspect to it. And look, I think, like many people, I would be a lot more sympathetic to it, Rebecca, if I could point at something and go, that's absolutely 100% going in the right place. But it feels a bit, to me anyway, and I think it feels a lot like it to lots of people, which is like there's this arbitrary pot of money and that just has to go. And we end up doing things like trying to fund AI-infused pollution repellents in Kuala Lumpur. Well, do we really need to do that? You know, and I find that quite a hard sell for the British public when we could keep that money at home.
The main problem, I think, is the comms issue. So the way that this is delivered makes people feel really angry, and I understand why, because it's one of those things that does really well on Twitter and on Facebook and on social media, because it sounds awful. When you say people in this country are starving and we're sending millions of pounds to rich people in China, it does sound terrible, I understand that. But there is more to it. So one of the things that I didn't realise until quite recently is that the way that they calculate the money that goes there is not, you don't get a cheque, you don't get, like, money. It's not a wire transfer. That is how it's calculated by services. So in Afghanistan, 2022, Afghanistan was the main beneficiary, 352 million. That includes the army being there and the army coming out. It includes all those dogs that Gary Johnson made Boris put on helicopters. It's actually, that might have been charities, that might be unfair.
All right.
But it's a much wider amount of money, not just being given money for nothing. And the other thing is, it's a bit cruel to cherry-pick the worst of the worst. The Chinese opera, for instance, I believe, though I need to double-check this, one of the major capabilities for foreign aid that we've been encouraged to explore is female education. So across the world, girls can't go to school, they can't learn to read. That's obviously a very significant problem. We, as a country, as a good country full of good people, want women to learn to read and go to school.
What are we getting out of it for China? Why can't China do it themselves? They just put something on Mars.
I don't think anybody is suggesting this is perfectly run, and absolutely countries should have to be more accountable. We need to do a better job both on how we spend, how that money is given, but also how it's reported, because at the moment I can completely see that this sounds dreadful. In reality, it's actually us helping people across the world.
You say that, but we have had years of this stuff, you know. What was that? 25 million quid towards Kenyan rainmakers to help meteorologists. With respect, meteorologists do not need help from Kenyan rainmakers, and we've paid for that. Why are we doing that? And there is a compare and contrast. At the moment, we've just seen a government, and this, by the way, is not Labour's fault, because this is stuff from the last year or so Labour have not been responsible for this now. However, I will caveat that by saying that one of the first things that Keir Starmer did was wanted to give £84 million to other countries to try to help stem the flow of people here. That we have no way, really, of keeping tabs on whether or not there will ever be money well spent.
Yeah, so here are two things to pick up a bit on what Suzanne and Rebecca have said. The first thing is, if you look through the historical data, there doesn't seem to be any correlation whatsoever with international aid going in and getting some of the desirable outcomes that Rebecca's
So you
speaking
don't
of.
think that Afghanistan and Ukraine were a good use of money?
Well, I'm talking about these educational
so you didn't say that. You didn't say that.
Afghanistan was a catastrophic waste.
So you don't think that, for instance, women being able to leave Afghanistan to finish their medical degrees here was a useful or good thing?
You may be able to find individual cases.
OK, so you said there were none. It's not none.
No. These Chinese opera singers are doing well out of it. You'll be able to find individual cases. But if you're looking at the economy as a whole, no correlation at all between Western aid and economic growth. If you could show there was one, we've given a lot of money to country X year after year after year, and look at how bountiful it is 25 years later.
That's predominantly not why we do it. We do it for a humanitarian reason.
The second disastrous element, which Suzanne pointed to, this target of 0.7% is madly out of date, completely arbitrary, and means that there's pressures on officials to shuffle as much money out of the door as possible. We should be spending money on humanitarian projects on a case-by-case basis.
Well, that target isn't arbitrary. It's supposed to be
a UN arbitrary target.
And being in the UN is a fairly important and significant thing.
That target dates back to 1974.
I'm not saying it's a perfect number.
The whole economic world has changed since 1974. It is arbitrary and it's out of date, and it certainly.
But I don't think anybody.
If you really want to help these people have more free trade with them, that's really what you need.
Just to ask something, though, generally, I can understand that in the idea when times are plentiful and everything's going really well, that we might want to have more of a humanitarian look abroad. But right now in Britain, we've got some pensioners who are really worried about whether or not they're going to be able to turn the heating on this winter. Why should we really be doing any foreign humanitarian work when we've got that going on at home?
I don't personally feel that levels of poverty in some countries are comparable to levels of poverty here. Of course, I do not think that a pensioner should worry about heating, ever, in any country. But to me, a human is a human, and I don't feel I have more in common with them because I was born on the same landmass as they do, personally.
Right. But if they're paying the tax, that's the thing. Yeah. I get that. You know, you've got a worldview, fine, we differ on that. But if it's British taxpayers' money, does the British government not have a responsibility to put those taxpayers first?
There should be a way of doing both. It shouldn't be an either-or. And a lot of the ways that we do tax in this country, I don't think work particularly well anyway.
But Rebecca, you're just making the case for not having that fixed 0.7% of GNI. And Mark, so, you know, they're pushing this out of the door. There have been circumstances when the civil servants responsible for spending this budget have been given huge bonuses just because they spend that money in time at the end of the financial year. It is obscene. There's no other way to say
But I don't think anybody is
Apparently
arguing...
3 in 10 children in the UK live in poverty, so that's 4.
Absolutely, but even if you scrap foreign aid overnight, that would not disappear as a problem. The title of the debate is, should we stop sending foreign aid to countries like China and India? That would be getting rid... So if there's an earthquake, if there's a flood, no aid to these countries.
I think there should be humanitarian. But the truth is, Rebecca, it is an either-or. A decision which all politicians of all stripes always say they're making tough decisions. But it's actually a straight mathematical decision, which is how do you spend the marginal pound? If you've got £1 million, how do you carve it up? And I think there's a case, Patrick, to actually say that foreign aid, other than in extreme humanitarian circumstances, should come out of any budget surplus that the government runs.
Specifically, the 2 most expensive things we did in 2022 were Ukraine and Afghanistan, both of which we would still have had to do under your system.
Well, I would put
the £200,000 that you talked about earlier, unfortunately, in real-life terms, is nothing. To me, obviously, that's a life-changing amount of money. To a whole country, it's nothing.
Yeah, but we shouldn't slice it up that way. I mean, Afghanistan and Ukraine should have been Ministry of Defence expenditure, unambiguously.
It still comes out of the same pot, ultimately. It's just money we do or don't have.
That's a defence operation. This is aimed much more at
I think that's very much semantics at this point.
And humanitarian experiences. So I'd allow the MOD to function.
Fine. A lively start. And there's plenty more where that came from, because we do have a bumper show for you tonight, actually. Labour has been accused of more cronyism. Sue Gray seemingly stacks the civil service with political appointees. So why isn't there more outrage at that? Reform MP Lee Anderson gives his unfiltered opinion on that. Now, Labour's bank-breaking servitude to the unions as well. Yvette Cooper's dubious deportation drive. It's all to play for this evening. But up next, yes, as Rachel Reeves paves the way for tax rises after a £3 billion borrowing surge in last month. That was just it, last month. Will the Chancellor bankrupt Britain to satisfy the unions? Former Labour Party advisor Matthew Torbit goes head-to-head with former Tory MP Marco Longhi, and it's next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's have a look at this story in the Telegraph, Charlie. And this is about Anglican Church, the Church of England, dropping the word church in favour of something a bit more modern sounding. Words such as community. Why are we afraid of the word church?
Well, that's my question. I mean, you've got to assume that they think it solves some kind of problem. But I think, there are a lot of people who feel very strongly about their particular religious institution, whatever they all have different names, don't they? And if you rename one, do you have to rename all of them? Can we no longer use an individual name for different religions, community buildings?
Are you religious?
I'm spiritual.
You sound like him.
No, certainly.
Oh, don't get any started on me.
Do I believe in a god? Yes. Do I believe in any of the particular gods that are offered to us? Still undecided.
I'm like you. I said exactly that.
You two are the same. You two are exactly
What about you, Anna? Are you particularly religious?
Well, I'm not a proper religious. I won't name myself as a religious, but I really do respect religions. And we have bigger problems to think about.
Is it a sign of where we're at in this secular society?
Yes.
We're moving more and more towards that the Anglican Church feels that the only way to be relevant is to take away any reference to church going, to being religious.
I think if the substance of what you're offering is good, it doesn't matter what it's called. So if people are going to find solace and peace and a place that makes them feel better, they're not going to care too much about what it's called. So I think relabeling it, rebranding it, I don't know, maybe it'll help, maybe it won't, but it's going to certainly upset a lot of people, I should think.
And people whose religion is important to them and kind of central to their lives, you can imagine.
Absolutely.
There's a reason Justin Welby is nicknamed by some quarters the Archbishop of Woke. Maybe this adds fuel to the fire, who knows?
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Well, Lee Anderson is up soon. We've got rather a lot to talk about there, haven't we? But first, will Rachel Reeves bankrupt Britain to satisfy Labour's union paymasters? It's time now for the head-to-head. Absolutely remarkable story emerged today. So the Chancellor is paving the way for October tax rises after bumper paydays for public sector workers, fuelled by a multi-billion-pound surge in government borrowing. The Treasury borrowed £3.1 billion in July alone, apparently, just according to the Office for National Statistics, way more than the £100 million anticipated by the Office for Budget Responsibility. So far this financial year, the government has borrowed £51.4 billion, that's £4.7 billion more than was predicted. So the spending watchdog said higher pay deals for public sector workers were a key factor. But this figure could get even worse, as it doesn't account for the 22% and 14% pay rises for junior doctors and train workers, respectively. But after leaving pensioners out in the cold by scrapping the winter fuel allowance, Labour appear to have made a clear choice. Unions over the elderly. So will Rachel Reeves bankrupt Britain to satisfy her union paymasters? Going head-to-head on this, I am joined by the former Labour Party advisor Matthew Torbett and former Tory MP Marco Longhi. Chaps, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Marco, I'll start with you. Is Reeves going to bankrupt Britain to pay the unions?
Well, it certainly looks that way, doesn't it, Patrick? $3 billion just this month. You know, we all know what's going to happen. It's going to mean higher tax rises. And we all know that when a government, as it did in the 70s, keeps on caving into the unions, all that happens is that they keep coming back for more. And guess what happened in the 70s? I'm a child of the 60s. I remember some of this. They bankrupt Britain. Inflation went to over 25%. And we see how much people suffered when inflation went up to just 11% in this country just a few months ago. So Reeves is, if she does continue down this path, she may well find herself trading her so-called fiscal responsibility for political gain to keep her union puppet masters happy.
Matthew, £3.1 billion borrowed just in July, and all the kind of officials are saying the key factor in this was public sector spending. I mean, is that not just appeasing the unions at the expense of everybody else? How can we justify that?
I don't think it's appeasing. I think why should paying people properly be seen as appeasing? I think I spoke recently about the £20 billion black hole that Rachel Reeves had uncovered, or maybe hadn't uncovered, depending on your point of view, and was told by former Conservative cabinet members that actually 20 billion wasn't all that much, it was just a rounding error. So if she's borrowing $4 billion, it's clearly not that much at all. I think also there needs to be a little bit of reality about some of the public sector pay rises. They're being called inflation busting. Now, that might be because inflation is currently at 2%. But if you look at the rail workers and the train drivers as an example, they last got a pay rise in 2019, and inflation added up since 2019 to now is 30%. So actually what they've taken is a real terms pay cut of 14% over 3 years. So the idea that Rachel Reeves, former governor of the Bank of England, is going to bankrupt Britain just is for the birds.
OK. All right, Mark, I'll bring you in on that, because Rachel Reeves also stands accused of being gleeful, accepting around £330,000 worth of gifts and freebies, etc., which I will say, you know, accepting stuff is not uncommon, as you probably will know, Marco. But, yeah, Rachel Reeves' full 350-odd grand freebie and payment list, you know, simultaneously borrowing 3.1 billion quid and, cutting off pensioners this winter. It's not great luck, is it?
Well, you know what, Patrick? It brings me back to a speech that she gave about a couple of years ago about freezing cold pensioners with small private pensions. But yet she's perfectly comfortable in cutting winter fuel payments for millions of them now. Her actions are going to speak louder than her empty words. Her concern for the elderly absolutely ring very hollow when she's the one turning down the heat on their lives. And how can she understand the struggles of low-income, vulnerable people when she is the one pocketing £337,000 in donations? Yes, politicians do receive donations because we accept it's a system that's better than the taxpayer subsidising them. But you know what? When you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer, when you're the one that's supposed to be setting the example, when you're the one then cutting winter fuel payments when just 2 years ago you were saying, oh, look at these horrible Tories, they might do this to you, and then she does it, that smacks of rank hypocrisy.
Matthew, how can she claim when she delivers this budget in October that she's been left with the worst economic situation imaginable, that there's this £20 billion black hole, and stand there with a straight face when she's literally just borrowed £3.1 billion in a single month?
There's a black hole, Patrick.
It doesn't look...
Sorry, I'm going to go to Matthew. I'll go to Matthew, yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Admittedly, it doesn't look good politically, the way it's been written up by the Express, but the devil will always be in the detail. Now, I've had a look at Rachel's declaration over the last 12 months. £350,000 has been accepted in what the Express call supplementary income, and I think we need to be very honest and accurate about what this is. The MPs don't receive any extra money. It goes to the office of the MP, and 330 of the £350,000 that Rachel's received over the last 12 months was for staffing, and that doesn't surprise me. If I ever was up in the Leader of the Opposition's offices, which wasn't very often, I must admit, Rachel Reeves had her own office and also had 2 overspill offices, which is what you'd probably want from someone that was wanting to run the country's finances. So what we're talking about here is basically a bottle of plonk, a holiday home gift in Cornwall for a week, and a couple of tickets to the Proms and the Opera. I don't think that plays any correlation to the cuts to winter fuel allowance. There isn't any correlation there at all. What you could say there is a correlation of is people like Marco, who's on with us tonight, who owns 10 houses and then threatening to vote against the Renters Reform Bill and to stop no-fault evictions. There is a correlation, and wondering what interests are at play. I don't think there is any of that with Rachel Reeves.
OK, Matthew, I will let Marco come back to that in a second, but I just want to ask you about this while you're here, which is, it's all very well and good saying, well, this is going to be the pay rises for the public sector, and we're going to have to borrow £3.1 billion and possibly a little bit more going forward, or quite a lot more going forward, to pay for that. But there do not appear to be any conditions attached to that. And so she's done that, and possibly at the expense of having to find money somewhere else, to tax other people, to potentially cut some of the elderly off. But we are not necessarily going to get any better public services for this money. I mean, that does smack of just shamelessly appeasing union paymasters, Matthew, doesn't it?
No, I think if they have been outmanoeuvred, when none of us were in the room and heard what was said, for them to agree certain pay rises and then be told the following week by a different union, well, actually, we're going on strike over a dispute with managers having to work on Sundays or whatever it is, that's not great. I think it also points to, that we're not going to see a great improvement at the moment, but I think that's also because we've been let down by governments, not just Conservative, but also successive governments for the last 30 years who haven't invested in our rail infrastructure, and we saw that with the end of HS2. It should have been built from the north downwards, so at least we would have had a Manchester to Birmingham line or whatever it might have been. Instead, we've got a Birmingham to London line, which we've already got multiple of. So, it's successive governments that have let us down on this.
All right. Now, look, Mark, I have to ask, you can, come back to any of what's just been said there by Matthew, but we don't have an opposition, do we? I mean, Rishi Sunak was last seen in Beverly Hills somewhere, at a restaurant where I think the cheapest pizza was 40-odd quid, or dollars. All of this stuff is happening now. We've got a Labour government that's potentially about to put a budget out that many people are thinking, well, hang on a flipping minute, you're going to cripple Britain if you keep going at this rate. And we have got no opposition to it. What's going on?
Well, of course, I'm not even there, Patrick, so, you could perhaps speak from a better informed position than myself. What I will say, though, is that when your other guest speaker talks about correlations, how about correlations between the £15,000 that Rachel Reeves received from Richard Parker, who then subsequently, guess what, gets selected for the mayoral candidacy in the West Midlands? I see he's nodding and agreeing. He is now the mayor of the West Midlands. What about the £20,000 that advisor who's now been appointed to the Treasury? Isn't this all a bit sleazy? We're talking about hypocrisy. We're talking about potentially bankrupting the country. We're talking about Labour sleaze. Those are way more important things of the fact that than compared to me, who's worked all my life to build up a little nest egg of 10 properties that weren't being used at all. And I made sure that I have tenants there now in these properties. If we want to talk about renters reform, that's a separate conversation.
It is
because I can speak with nearly 30 years worth of experience. I don't know. I'm not sure your other guest really knows what he's talking about.
All right, look, both of you, thank you very, very much. It was yet again a proper head-to-head. We're on a good run of head-to-heads here on this show at the moment, so thank you very much. As former Labour Party advisor Matthew Torbett and former Tory MP Marco Longhi, both giving as good as they got there, I think. So who do you agree with? As Rachel Reeves paves the way for tax rises after this £3.1 billion borrowing surge, will the Chancellor bankrupt Britain just to satisfy the unions? Alex on X says, if we significantly cut foreign aid, we could make the majority of people in this country better off, which would negate the need for unions. All right, Alex, well, there we go. Barry says, more like she'll bankrupt Britain, but the unions still won't be satisfied. I'm detecting a note of cynicism here. Steve says, they always have and always will, but in the past they at least tried to be subtle. Now they just don't care. The unions are yet again running and ruining the country. I never thought I'd see it again. How wrong can you be? Not a huge amount of chlorine in that particular swimming pool there. But your verdict is now in. 95% of you agree that the Chancellor will bankrupt Britain to satisfy the unions. 5% of you say no. I wonder whether this loveless landslide is going to turn a little bit more loveless very, very quickly. Coming up, ex-Tory Minister Nadine Dorries has joined this growing chorus of people who think that baby-killing nurse Lucy Letby might be innocent. I'll be honest with you, I don't quite understand this, so I want to find out what's going on there. Retired Met Police Detective Inspector Hamish Brown casts his expert eye over the case shortly. Plus, I will show you the dramatic escape attempt of some UK drug smugglers.
Stop the rip for safety! Stop the rip! Stop the rip now!
Looks like Border Force might have been able to stop something. But next, Labour has been accused of more cronyism as Sue Gray seemingly stacks the civil service with political appointees. Look, why isn't there more outrage? And actually, frankly, why should this really matter to you at home? Reform MP Lee Anderson tackles that, as well as train unions that's more demanding even more pay for less work, and Yvette Cooper's dubious deportation drive. It's all to play for, and it's next.
Hi there, time for the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. An unsettled 36 to 48-hour period to come for many parts of the UK. A series of low-pressure systems queuing up to arrive from the Atlantic. One heading towards Iceland, another one containing the remnants of ex-Hurricane Ernesto. That means, although it's a fairly typical area of low pressure that we see in the North Atlantic at this time of year, it does contain air of tropical origins and a lot of moisture. All that moisture will be dumped over western Scotland, northwest England, parts of Wales and Northern Ireland overnight. And the winds will pick up as well, with gales, 50 to 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts around the Irish Sea coast first thing Thursday, as well as the hills of North Wales, Northern England and southern Scotland could cause some transport disruption during the Thursday morning period. Drier towards the southeast, a lot of cloud around and a breezy start to the day, but the wet weather pushing into southwest England, Wales and northwest Scotland, and having dumped 100 to 150 millimetres of rain over the hills of western Scotland, there's the risk of disruption during Thursday morning, even as that clears away, the risk of localised flooding. Now, brighter skies do return to Scotland and Northern Ireland, although with a scattering of showers moving in from the west, whilst the frontal system pushes southeastwards as a weakening feature, no more than a few dribs and drabs of rain by the time it gets to the southeast of England on Thursday afternoon. Otherwise, sunshine late on across Wales, the Midlands and northern England, but the same can't be said for Friday. A very unsettled start to the day, wet and windy once again as another low moves across the UK. It does pull through quickly and brighter skies once again into the afternoon, but with further showers coming into the northwest, and that sets the scene for the bank holiday weekend. Now, for England, Wales and Northern Ireland, it is a bank holiday and we can expect a mix of sunny spells and showers.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Now, there's been a lot going on, so you might have missed this, but there is a bit of a fresh Labour scandal actually erupting because Sue Gray gifted a Labour think tank director a top job in Whitehall in the civil service, supposedly impartial, isn't it? Jess Sargent spent the past year as director at a group called Labour Together, which has close links to Sir Keir Starmer and his allies. But she's been quietly appointed Deputy Director of the Cabinet Office Propriety and Constitution Group, which rolls off the tongue. That means that she is responsible for ensuring the highest standards of propriety and ethics across all government departments. Well, this is the latest civil service appointment to raise eyebrows, after two Labour donors, Ian Caulfield and Emily Middleton, were given jobs as top mandarins. Well, is the civil service being overtly politicised by Labour like never before? I'm joined now by Reform MP Lee Anderson. Lee, thank you very, very much. I mean, this is, frankly, bang out of order, isn't it? I don't quite understand how this can be OK. I mean, if this was the Tories or indeed Reform, I mean, there'd be uproar, wouldn't there?
Well, there would, Patrick, but the problem we have at the moment is there's no opposition in Parliament to all this nonsense that's going on. We see the civil service being infiltrated by the left. Most of the councils in the country are now run by the Labour Party. Most of the police and crime commissioners in the country are Labour police and crime commissioners. We've got most of the mayors in the country are Labour Party members.
Yeah, but they're voted on, though, mate. They're voted for, right?
As well. So there's no opposition, Patrick. There's no opposition at all in this country at the moment.
I get that, but, you know, people will say, look, we vote for police, although I don't know anyone who ever actually has voted for a police and crime commissioner. They are voted for, the mayors, etc. But, you know, civil service is supposedly, well, impartial. And if people thought there was a left-wing bias in the civil service, which we were constantly told didn't exist, and now you look at some overt left-wingers and Labour donors being planted into top jobs in the civil service, you do have to wonder, well, what hope would any right-winger ever have of performing a functional government?
Well, they haven't, Patrick. I mean, this is Keir Starmer all over. You know, I mentioned this on your show before, where he won't let the Reform UK Party have any members on the select committees. It's got a massive majority. You know, the media are all over us. And like I said, Patrick, at the beginning of this interview, there is no opposition in this country at the moment. You know, Sir Keir Stasi is becoming like an authoritarian leader in this country, and he's going to fill the civil service with his friends. It is cronyism, and it's a slippery slope. And I really worry for the future of this country, Patrick.
Well, I mean, it is astonishing. It does hark back to the kind of traditional socialist thing that you do, which is to try to stack the institutions full of your own. I mean, look, a Cabinet Office spokesman said this. There are clear rules governing recruitment and appointment of civil service roles, which are regulated by the Civil Service Commission. We do not comment on individual staffing matters. Well, all right. I mean, that's their argument for now, isn't it? But people will be keeping a very close eye on this. Now, Lee, in an unsurprising turn of events, Labour's union paymasters aren't satisfied by bumper pay rises and are now effectively demanding more money for less work. On top of a 14% pay rise, the Transport Salaried Staffs Association has demanded 38 days off per year and a 35-hour week for its members. And the TSSA are likely to get their way too, because they were one of the 3 trade unions that met with the Department for Transport officials for negotiations yesterday. So, Lee, is this where we are now, which is that unions are going to be getting more money for less work?
Well, it is, Patrick. This is a free meal ticket for the public sector workers and the trade unions responsible at a time, Patrick, when we look at some of our most impoverished pensioners in this country who's just had their winter fuel allowance stopped. These are people on about 12 grand a year. At the same time, we're giving train drivers on 60-odd grand a year massive pay rises. This is a modern-day Labour Robin Hood. This is the redistribution of poverty amongst our pensioners. They're taking off the pensioners and giving it to people on 60, 70 grand a year. You know what? We knew this was coming, Patrick. We knew the trade unions would hold the Labour Party to ransom. And there's a simple reason for that, is because the trade unions are the paymasters of the Labour Party. And I think you just touched on earlier when Marco was on about how much money Rachel Reeves has received from certain donors. This is what happens when you get a Labour government.
Well, it'd be interesting. I mean, look, if people's public services do start to function better and we do see an uptick in it, then people might say, OK, fair enough. But that is the great unknown at the moment, isn't it? And it's whether they keep coming back for more, which might be an implication. But we'll have to wait and see. But finally, Ellie, Yvette Cooper has pledged to detain more illegal migrants and carry out a record number of deportations. The Home Secretary plans to expand immigration detention centres as part of a plan to remove more than 14,500 illegal migrants in the next 6 months. So here's a little snippet of what Home Office Minister Seema Malhotra had to say earlier.
The Prime Minister announced our first steps, in which we would be bringing in the Border Security Command and also taking steps to make sure that rules are enforced. That's why today's announcement is so important. We're announcing that we've got 100 new staff, specialist officers in the NCA, boosting numbers by 1/3 to make sure that there is the capability we need to tackle those evil criminal gangs that are undermining our border security and putting lives at risk.
Well, Lee, do you trust Yvette Cooper to get those numbers down?
Well, I don't, Patrick. And that number they just quoted, 14,500 or whatever it was, that's nothing new. I think we deported about 27,000 people who should not be in this country last year. Look, Patrick, nobody believes a word what Yvette Cooper said. Bear in mind, this is when she was a shadow Home Secretary. This is a woman who signed a letter to stop, people being deported to Jamaica. These were murderers. These were rapists. These were people that committed horrific sex crimes. One of them, by the way, who didn't get on the flight, went on to commit another murder. So I don't believe a word she said. I think most people will take what she said with a pinch of salt.
One thing I will say on that, Lee, is not trying to disagree with you for the sake of it here or anything like that, is I will have to go back and double-check that her name was on that letter. I know that several Labour MPs were, but I'm not 100% sure if she was one of them. But some people will say, well, this is low-hanging fruit, right? She's actually going to go for people who say work at car washes illegally or work at nail bars illegally. And actually, those people are always very easy to get out of this country. And if we have 1.2 million of those, as we do right now, why couldn't the Tories have done that? Even thinking back to when you were a Tory MP, why couldn't they have just got rid of them?
Because it was weak, Patrick. It was weak. They had no political courage. They had no political backbone. They didn't have the will. I used to raise this on a weekly basis with various people in the Home Office and ministers and the Home Secretaries at the time. It was just weak leadership. It's quite simple to do, Patrick. If you're not in this country legally, then you should be deported.
All right. Lee, thank you very much. As ever, that's Lee Anderson, Reform MP. Coming up, I'll bring you the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. And can you tell me, please, what's going on here? Yes, but next, bizarre story this. Ex-Tory Minister Nadine Dorries has joined a growing chorus of experts, politicians, who think that convicted baby-killing nurse Lucy Letby might actually be innocent. So why is this case facing fresh scrutiny? Retired Met Police Detective Inspector Hamish Brown is trying to get to the bottom of that, and he's next.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
A new exhibition at Gainsborough's house in Sudbury in Suffolk is the first to chart the artistic careers of Cedric Morris, who lived from 1889 to 1982, and Arthur Let Haynes, who lived from 1894 to 1978. They were partners in love and art for 60 years. I'm joined now by the exhibition curator, Dr. Pat Hardy. Some people will not be in the least bit familiar with these two British artists. So do you want to say a word of background about Cedric Morris and Arthur Let Haynes?
About 100 artworks were left in 2017 of Cedric Morris's works. And it was felt then that an exhibition to showcase that work would be very appealing to the public. Morris's flower paintings have had a lot of traction. They've become very popular commercially, and there's been more research done on them. So it was felt that it would be good to broaden out the flower painter aspects of Morris's work to showcase the portraits and the landscapes and protest paintings, which we now had in the collection. And it was also thought important that his partner, as you mentioned, for 60 years, Let Haynes, was also given some profile because he very much fell away into the shadows because he was promoting Morris's work and running the school, which was set up nearby, near Sudbury, near Gainsborough's house at Hadley, which was a very different type of art school. And a lot of people, both artists and locals, do remember it having been in operation and how wild it was and how bohemian they were. So it's felt to be a good story in personal terms, but also artistically, to try and place these two, particularly Morris, in the 20th century art world.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, former Tory Minister Nadine Dorries has put the conviction of Lucy Letby, a nurse found guilty of killing 7 babies, under fresh scrutiny. Dorries has called for an urgent review, arguing that the perilous state of maternity and neonatal care in hospitals was a factor too easily dismissed by the court. There are also concerns about the evidence used to convict Letby after the Crown Prosecution Service admitted vital prosecution data showing when Letby used a security door on the ward was incorrect. Well, I must admit, I find all this rather weird how this keeps resurfacing. But to discuss this now, I'm joined by a retired detective inspector with the Metropolitan Police, Hamish Brown. Hamish, there are issues, aren't there, with the quality of evidence that was submitted? I mean, is that the kind of thing that can cast this whole case into doubt?
Well, certainly, I mean, the prosecution are going to show that it was tampering with air tubes, it was poisoning. Lucy Letby was always there. That's the prosecution case. And there were notes found at her address which implied her guilt. By the same token, the defence is going to say, well, hang on a minute, you haven't actually got any direct witnesses. We did this incident, poisoning or tampering with the air tube. In fact, one doctor said it must have been her, but he didn't see her at all. So say that's not right. And the presentation enough the evidence. And they go on to say, well, look, it's coincidental that she happened to be there. So those are some of the main issues. There might be other things which will come up. But again, the prosecution will point out there have been trials, jury trials, where she has been convicted. The case has been closely looked at twice by the Court of Appeal, and she's lost those. So I think the prosecution are going to forward, look, we can't do anything else. What more do you want us to say?
What do you make of the fact that now a couple of former Tory cabinet ministers, amongst other people, by the way, are really seeming to pick up the mantle on this Lucy Letby case and raise some serious questions on it? I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, it is open to the defence if they want to make a further application to the Court of Appeal. There's been a serious miscarriage of justice, and we have seen that actually in a well-publicised rape case where someone was sentenced or served 17 years imprisonment and was ultimately released. So there is facility for that if there's that compelling evidence. It's not unusual for particularly celebrities, and I say this with the greatest respect, to jump on this sort of bandwagon when you don't know all the facts. But if they have concerns, they're entitled to make those representations by all means. But there has to be that compelling evidence. And again, the prosecution will point, I think, to a strong case closely looked at by both criminal and Court of Appeals, and that is their stance.
When it comes to cases like this, I know that, juries are supposed to be, impartial and not check any news or anything like this. I think it would have been impossible to not have unbelievably strong emotions about the deaths of so many babies and this conceivably relatively fresh-faced monster that Lucy Letby was, held up as. It may well be. I mean, is found guilty of being, and I want to make that very, very clear. Do you think that juries, who are essentially ordinary people, are qualified to actually reach verdicts in cases like this?
Well, in fact, having been a juror myself some years ago, I was foreman on two of the cases, and I was actually pretty impressed by the attitude of others. So I can say at first-hand experience, I've actually been there on a variety of cases, including one of a sexual nature. But, the jurors are faced with these cases. And when we look back to 1991, the nurse, Beverly Allett, she killed a number of little babies. Since then, of course, we've had Dr. Harold Shipman, Pillar of Society, and all that sort of thing. And the juries, they'll be told about Lucy Letby's background and what a nice person she is, and they will weigh that up, and they can be swayed by that, but they were not.
Just to say, one of the implications, sorry to cut you off, Hamish, but a bit pressed for time, one of the implications is that the quality of maternity care in Britain is so woefully awful that we have a catalogue of different maternity wards where babies die far, far, far too often. And if this was happening there, I think it was the Countess of Chester Hospital, the implication could be that Lucy Letby could have been a very useful scapegoat to that. I'm absolutely not saying that's what I think, but I'm saying that, for me, reading between the lines, is what some of these people are saying. Do you think there could be some truth to that?
Well, my understanding is that before she went on the ward, there were fatalities, and tragically that happens in any hospital, but they shot through the roof or considerably higher as soon as she went there, or when she was there and when on her watch. But this happens throughout the country, and the NHS, like a lot of other organisations, are terribly hard-pressed, and they do what they can. No system is perfect, and the NHS, in fact, when they saw as a problem on that ward, they had her out.
OK. Hamish, look, thank you very, very much. Incredibly difficult thing to talk about, slightly bizarre thing, but this keeps rearing its head. A procession of different high-profile people keep bringing it up. Hamish Brown there, retired Metropolitan Police officer. Now, a spokesman for the CPS said 2 juries and 3 appeal court judges have reviewed a multitude of evidence against Lucy Letby. She's been convicted on 15 separate counts following 2 separate jury trials. We can confirm that accurate door swipe data was presented at the retrial. We've been transparent in clarifying this issue and rectified it for the trial. We're confident that this issue did not have a meaningful impact on the prosecution, which included multiple strands of evidence. It does beg the question, why do so many people keep bringing this up? I'm not quite sure, but anyway, there we go. Next, Yvette Cooper has pledged to detain more illegal migrants. Do you believe her?
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, time for the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. An unsettled 36 to 48-hour period to come for many parts of the UK. A series of low-pressure systems queuing up to arrive from the Atlantic. One heading towards Iceland, another one containing the remnants of ex-Hurricane Ernesto. That means, although it's a fairly typical area of low pressure that we see in the North Atlantic at this time of year, it does contain air of tropical origins and a lot of moisture. All that moisture will be dumped over western Scotland, northwest England, parts of Wales and Northern Ireland overnight. And the winds will pick up as well, with gales, 50 to 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts around the Irish Sea coast first thing Thursday, as well as the hills of North Wales, Northern England and southern Scotland could cause some transport disruption during the Thursday morning period. Drier towards the southeast, a lot of cloud around and a breezy start to the day, but the wet weather pushing into southwest England, Wales and northwest Scotland, and having dumped 100 to 150 millimetres of rain over the hills of western Scotland, there's the risk of disruption during Thursday morning, even as that clears away the risk of localised flooding. Now, brighter skies do return to Scotland and Northern Ireland, although with a scattering of showers moving in from the west, whilst the frontal system pushes southeastwards as a weakening feature. No more than a few dribs and drabs of rain by the time it gets to the southeast of England on Thursday afternoon. Otherwise, sunshine late on across Wales, the Midlands and Northern England, but the same can't be said for Friday. A very unsettled start to the day, wet and windy once again as another low moves across the UK. It does pull through quickly and brighter skies once again into the afternoon, but with further showers coming into the northwest, and that sets the scene for the bank holiday weekend. Now, for England, Wales and Northern Ireland, it is a bank holiday and we can expect a mix of sunny spells and showers.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GB News Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am, having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, a Pakistani man is now blamed for spreading the initial misinformation about the Southport attack. What does this mean for those who blamed the far right? And
priority and the first step is to set up the new Border Security Command and to increase our law enforcement.
is Yvette Cooper lying about who Labour will deport? Plus,
I don't want to increase taxes on working people, and our commitment not to increase national insurance, income tax or VAT. We stand by those commitments.
feels like a big scandal as Labour borrowed £3.1 billion more than expected last month to pay off the unions. Also, find out what happened to those drug smugglers. On my panel tonight is the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, political consultant Suzanne Evans, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Oh yes, and who said the Germans don't have a sense of humour? Get ready, Britain, here we go. Is our Home Secretary unfit for the job? Next.
Good evening, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. 5 bodies have now been found inside the wreck of a luxury yacht that sank in a storm off the coast of Sicily. The bodies of British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch and his daughter Hannah are thought to be among them, but formal identification has not yet taken place. Sicily's Civil Protection Agency says 4 bodies were recovered from the super yacht this afternoon, but 1 body remains inside the wreckage. This takes the death toll so far to 6. 1 person is still missing, and the search for them will resume tomorrow. Police have launched a murder investigation after a delivery driver was involved in a collision during an attempted theft of his van. West Yorkshire Police said officers were called last night following reports of a man found seriously injured in Wortley, which is in Leeds. The victim was given emergency treatment but was pronounced dead at the scene. 4 people who died in a house fire in Bradford, including 3 children, have been named by West Yorkshire Police as 29-year-olds Brian Gawith and Destiny, who's 9, Oscar, who's 5, and Aubrey Birtle, who's just 22 months old. A murder investigation has been launched after the incident, which happened in the early hours of this morning on Westbury Road. Police believe the fire was started deliberately and was domestic-related. A 39-year-old man was arrested at the scene on suspicion of murder and was taken to hospital with critical injuries. The Home Office has outlined plans to tackle illegal immigration, including deploying new intelligence officers to target people smuggling gangs. Reopening immigration removal centres in Hampshire and Oxfordshire is also part of the plans, which will add 290 beds. Home Office Minister Seema Malhotra says it's important to tighten the country's border security, but the Conservatives say Labour are not serious about tackling the people smugglers or stopping the boats. Police have named a man killed in his own home by his pet XL bully dog. The victim was David Daintree. He was 53 years old, and specially trained officers are now supporting his family. Emergency services were called last night to a house at Ashley Court in Accrington in Lancashire after reports of a dog attacking someone inside. The XL bully was shot dead by police, who claimed the dog still posed a significant risk to others. An investigation is ongoing. And Taylor Swift has made Wembley history as she became the first solo artist to perform at the venue 8 times in a single tour. The pop superstar closed out the European leg of her Eras tour yesterday at Wembley Stadium with a packed show featuring special guests as she broke the record previously held by Michael Jackson for his Bad tour in 1988. With those other latest GB News headlines for now, I'm Cameron Walker. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Round up, detain and deport illegal immigrants. That's what new Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has just promised to do. Well, do you believe the woman who held up a sign saying refugees welcome, closed the Bibi Stockholm and scrapped Rwanda on day 1? Here's Home Office Minister Seema Malhotra trying to sell this plan today.
The Prime Minister announced our first steps, in which we would be bringing in the Border Security Command and also taking steps to make sure that rules are enforced. That's why today's announcement is so important. We're announcing that we've got 100 new staff, specialist officers in the NCA, boosting numbers by a third to make sure that there is the capability we need to tackle those evil criminal gangs that are undermining our border security and putting lives at risk.
Yvette Cooper has promised to deport 14,500 people in the next 6 months. Now, for context, our Home and Security Editor Mark White estimates that there are roughly 1.2 million illegal migrants in the UK. What Ms Cooper is conveniently not telling us, though, is that she plans to deport people who are working illegally in Britain or overstaying their visas to country who we already have returns agreements with. The low-hanging fruit, as it were. But this will do nothing to combat the Channel migrant crisis. Under Labour, we now have no deterrent. In fact, we actually have a massive incentive. Every single person who arrives illegally will be able to claim asylum under Labour because they're ignoring, it seems, the Illegal Migration Act. So will everyone on the backlog. So she says that she's going to increase capacity at detention facilities like Campsfield House and Gospar. Well, the left wing of her own party opposed this. MPs like John McDonnell, Diane Abbott, they signed a Commons motion opposing the inhumane detention of migrants at these centres. So she's got a rebellion on her hands there, hasn't she? Will Yvette Cooper go to war with the hard left? I'm not sure she will. Oh, and apparently it will take about 6 months to increase the capacity by a few hundred, all right? Well, around 15,000 Channel migrants could cross in that time. She says that she's going to increase the number of people processing asylum claims, but they're still going to be subject to appeal. And then she will suddenly have to contend with the same lefty lawyers that Labour have been cozying up to for years. Now, just to illustrate for you the psychology of some of the people who work as human rights or immigration lawyers in Britain, earlier this week, an asylum seeker was sent to jail for stabbing his own lawyer, OK? And that lawyer then said he felt sorry for the Eritrean who stabbed him because he has completed 5 years of residency being an asylum seeker from Eritrea and he would have been granted permanent residence. He said this incident has done a lot of damage to him as well. It's madness, isn't it? And we still don't have anyone in charge of the new border command. Why is that, I wonder? The Home Secretary can make a lot of noise about deporting people working in nail bars or car washes, but we have both sides of the Sudanese civil war currently fighting each other in Dunkirk and trying to come across to the Channel. And as it stands, she doesn't seem to have any plans to stop those boats. Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I'm joined by the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. I also have political consultant Suzanne Evans and author and journalist Rebecca Reed. Mark, so 14,500 people, if indeed she manages to do it, that sounds OK. But as we've just seen, the actual practicalities of all of this, they don't seem to add up.
Yeah, I think that's right, Patrick. And actually, although that would be an advance on recent years, it's nothing like the sort of numbers we were regularly deporting 15 or so years ago. Look, credit where credit is due. It is a baby step, I would say that, in the right direction, in that there has been a problem on capacity and enforcement. And the previous Conservative government needs to take quite a lot of the blame for that. But I think you hit the nail on the head in the end of your remarks there, that if the present legal structures remain the same, this is largely for the birds, because the whole process takes forever. I've lost count, Patrick, now how many times I've said on your show, why does it take 18 months to reach a decision? I'm not saying it can be done in 18 hours, but it should be done in 18 days. And unless we can streamline the legal process, there should be safeguards, obviously, but I don't think safeguards that require a year and a half on average, then really, I mean, this is a sledgehammer to fail to crack a nut, not much of a sledgehammer either. So, small step in the right direction. Enforcement matters, better administration, more capacity matters, but it's the legal system behind it that you've really got to fix, and there is no appetite to do that.
The 18-month thing, the general answer, because I've asked the same question, I've interviewed people who work in this, and one of the reasons it takes 18 months is because they're very long forms, and they're generally filled out by people who are very overworked and understaffed, and if you make one error in the form, then you can appeal it.
Well, that's
and
ridiculous,
every single time there's we've all filled out forms online, right? Like, it's really easy to do one box wrong, and every time that happens, the whole thing starts again.
But you're rather speaking to my case, Rebecca, that if one small, rather irrelevant box has been ticked wrong, we shouldn't go back to the starting point. We need a much more flexible, streamlined system.
But I think sometimes we look at this and we make it this huge, like, slightly tinfoil hat, like, conspiracy theory thing, and it's not that. It's a bad system.
It's a terrible.
It's badly set up. It's not good tech. And some of this is just handling it better, just processing it better.
Okay, yeah, fine. But it remains to be seen what they're actually trying to do about that. The numbers of people that they're looking to employ in that, I'm not really sure that equates to the amount of people needed necessarily in order to do it.
Certainly an improvement.
It's more than we had, so by definition, yes. But Suzanne, I do wonder whether or not she's capable of dealing with the same lefty lawyers. I mean, I just gave an example there of a lawyer there who had been stabbed by an asylum seeker that he was trying to help. That guy's gone to prison and he still comes out and says, I feel sorry for this guy because if he had not stabbed me, I could have let him stay in Britain. I mean, this is the kind of people they're going to be dealing with now.
Yeah, it is quite astonishing, isn't it? And, of course, you've got a huge illegal immigration legal system now, and that is a gravy train. I've walked past a lawyer's office in southwest London, and I couldn't believe it. I saw they actually had in their shop window, as it were, a list of people who they were working for in immigration cases. And there were like 6 or 7 blackboards full of foreign names. And I was gobsmacked. I thought, this is just one small legal practice in southwest London. It is an absolute racket. And I think Mark and Rebecca are actually agreeing the whole system must be sped up, and it is a nonsense, and the bureaucracy that's happening should sort it out. But I think, as Mark says, this is a step in the right direction. But I think Yvette Cooper is being a bit deluded. You know, she wants to deport 14,500 illegal migrants in the next 6 months, by which time, on current trends, 16,000 will have come over in small boats alone. And, of course, that's not the whole...
Well, yes, but if you don't do that, then you've got 30,000 more people that you guys didn't want here. Like, it does seem like you're really determined not to be pleased by this...
One thing that I will say is
rhetoric, Rebecca. They're all talking about it, nobody's doing anything. Same with the Tories.
But the thing is, it's not a deterrent to coming across the Channel, because the people who are coming across the Channel, almost to a man, are coming from countries, or at least claiming to, where we have no returns agreement. And what she's announcing here does nothing to stop that at all.
Well, there's 2 things there. One of them is that is one part of the problem, but one of the biggest demographics of people who come here come from Vietnam. And that is still illegal immigration, and it's still a problem if you think that it's a problem. So low-hanging fruit is not a bad thing to get rid of. Why it wasn't done under the previous government, I don't understand, but if you can do it, do it. That makes sense. Secondarily, in terms of the Channel problem, that is a really, really sticky problem that's been a sticky problem for a long time. But I'm telling you, the gangs are the place to really put your energy. If you can smash the gangs, then you really can stop the flow. And then it's about better negotiations with France, because France are taking the word I can't say.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But they're not smashing the gangs.
Yeah, that's...
Well, no, but they've been in power for 49 days.
Yeah, but it was always a ridiculous thing to say. Smash the gangs.
It's probably unachievable.
No, it's not. It's not a soundbite. It's a plan.
There are 500 gangs spread across the world.
I've interviewed people who work in cybersecurity whose main job is trying to do this, who under the previous government said there have been times where we literally could have got people and we didn't have the funding to do it. If you don't invest in it, people can't do it. It's mostly cybercrime.
But here's the essence of the problem. I'm sceptical about gang smashing. It hasn't really worked in the war on drugs, for example. I don't think it will work in the war on people trafficking either. What you've got to make sure is that what these gangs are selling is not a viable product. And at the moment, it is a vaguely viable product. It's hugely expensive.
I'm not sure you're right about that, because you can die doing it.
No, you can die doing it, but your chances...
They're not very slim.
Very slim, Rebecca.
You can die doing it, but you've also got a very fair chance of being able to remain in the UK if you make it. If you can change the odds there, you don't need to smash the gangs. You just put them out of business.
But without a returns agreement, that's incredibly complicated.
It is complicated.
You can't just dump people on the side of the road and say...
You can't. You need something like Rwanda.
The other thing, which I don't think can be overstated on this at all, is the strength of opposition from within her own party and from the left that Yvette Cooper is going to come under when she tries to put more people in detention centres. This is a woman who made a virtue of shutting the Bibby Stockholm. That was terrible.
Bibby Stockholm was a liability.
Right. Fine. Well, some of these centres they're expanding have historically burnt down. They've had massive suicide rates. They've had riots in there as well. She cannot simultaneously claim that now a good solution to this is to put more people in detention centres like that.
But you run them better as well. You put more people in them, but you don't run them terribly. And also, fundamentally, it doesn't matter if people on the far left of the party don't like it, because they've got a staggering majority and they can afford to annoy a few people.
Can you explain one thing to me, which is that we currently have the illegal migration bill, yes? And under that, anyone who enters Britain illegally now cannot claim asylum. The Labour Party are yet to repeal that, right? So are they breaking the law now by letting these people claim asylum?
I can't clarify that for you because, as I've already said, the law surrounding this is so goddamn complex and not streamlined enough. But I think that the Labour government are trying to have it both ways. I agree with Rebecca that John McDonnell and Diane Abbott kicking off should not cause the Home Secretary too many sleepless nights, given the majority they've got. But I think they're going to have a narrative problem. Is this government going to be serious and, if you like, tough on immigration? And, you know, that is going to require some potentially really difficult decisions. Not all detention centres will be perfect. Bad things will happen in them, and Labour MPs and others will kick off about that. Or are they going to sort of do this, have their cake and eat it bit, which is what they're doing?
Well, no, you say yes to asylum and no to economic migrants. You know, if you need to be here, you should be here, and if you don't, you can't be. That's easy, clear, everyone can understand that.
The thing is, immigration is now, for the first time in 6 years, the #1 concern among the British electorate. If Labour is genuinely serious about this, they could just win another parliamentary term if they sort it out. But at the moment, we're just hearing a lot of rhetoric. They still haven't even appointed the head of Border Security Command, which I think is a gimmick, frankly, but they've not done it yet. We had a lot of rhetoric about stopping the boats from successive Conservative prime ministers. Good luck to Yvette Cooper. If she can do it, she'll probably
She's
win
been in for like 49 days.
Yeah, we're speculating on what 49 months are going to look like.
I'm speculating on what the future might look like. But as I say, #1 issue again now. Hasn't been for 6 years. #1 issue again.
They've got to fix it. Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see. Watch this space, and clearly so many people will indeed be watching it with a very close eye. But coming up, I will bring you some exclusive Tory leadership polling, actually, after I deliver the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Yes, that should be one to watch. Some quite interesting results there. But next, again, another quite weird situation going on here, right? So a Pakistani man is now being blamed for spreading the initial round of misinformation about the Southport attack, right? What does this mean for those people who blame the far right? Free Speech Union founder Toby Young is live, and he's next. Stay tuned.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Paul Spires is a much-loved part of this South London community.
When I first got here, it was so quiet, and after 3 months, I decided to buy myself a speaker. I started playing music. Everyone loved it.
So when 200 residents from Beckenham chipped in more than £3,000 to send a sweeper on a summer break to Portugal, it was a moment of great local spirit.
I'm overwhelmed with it. I'm just here to do a job to best of my ability, and the way they've reacted is brilliant.
Lisa Knight, an estate agent, said she started the campaign after becoming friends with Mr Spires.
Last Monday, I bumped into him after work. It was a 30-degree day and he'd been working all day. So we stood and had a chat like we often do. And he explained to me that it was his birthday on Tuesday and he wanted to save up to go to Portugal because he's only ever been abroad once for his 60th birthday. And after he left, I decided to make the GoFundMe. So we shared it on the local Beckenham Appreciation Group on Facebook, which is huge, and it just flew away.
But Mr Spires was unable to take the trip due to his employer's rules on accepting gifts. A solution appeared when a travel company spotted an opportunity to help out.
onthebeach.com had an amazing idea to run a competition whereby Paul would be the winner. He had to be aged between the age of 62 and 64, be loved in Beckenham, have the surname Spears and love Elvis, and so he still gets to go on holiday.
We only have matched that £3,000 to donated to who I have wanted nominated, and after cancer research, which they've already done.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News. Now, this is a slightly bizarre story, but an important one nonetheless, I feel. A man in Pakistan has been arrested and charged after allegedly spreading misinformation that fuelled the UK riots earlier this month. Now, according to police in Pakistan, Farhan Asif was linked to a website that gave a false name for the suspected Southport attacker and reportedly suggested that he was an asylum seeker who arrived in the UK on a small boat. So this is actually the charge sheet now that's been issued by the Pakistani authorities. We here at GB News have exclusively been given this charge sheet. Now, it does cast doubt, I think, when you look at this, on the theory that this was all a far-right plot to whip up tensions from the start. All right? I'm joined now by the founder and General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Toby, thank you very much. Now, the fact that people have been jailed over spreading misinformation is, some would say, chilling enough. But this makes it seem a little bit stranger, doesn't it? You know, this is a man in Pakistan who put something out online. And what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The Pakistani authorities are accusing this guy and his news agency of being the first news source to identify the attacker as an asylum seeker, which we now know was false. But it does suggest that Keir Starmer's analysis, his initial claim that these riots were organised by far-right agitators, many of them from outside the areas where the disorder took place, was itself fake news. So one of the ironic implications of this, Patrick, is that the Prime Minister himself may be guilty under the offence created by the Online Safety Act of knowingly publishing false information which has a harmful effect. I mean, you could argue that by blaming far-right agitators from outside the areas where the riots were taking place, Keir Starmer effectively encouraged counter-protesters, Muslim counter-protesters for the most part, to form mobs, to police areas, to identify and attack people they thought were far-right agitators from outside their area. So you could argue that Keir Starmer's misinformation regarding who was behind the riots contributed to a harmful outcome, and he could therefore be guilty of an offence under the Online Harms Act.
Look, one thing that nothing will excuse is the fact that wherever this particular piece of misinformation came from, right, you should not then look at that and decide that you're going to go and burn down a migrant hotel. And I think that we can all agree with that. But it does, for me, highlight this ridiculous idea that, you know, more social media clampdown or pinning everything on the far right is the answer here, because in the modern world, it strikes me that you are never in a million years going to be able to stop a random bloke from Pakistan putting something like that out there. He, by the way, apparently is trying to say that he got some of this information from somewhere that turned out to maybe be Florida or Russia. We don't know. But arresting people in this country for looking at that information does just seem a little bit weird.
I think it is a little bit weird, and it's actually contrary to what Keir Starmer said when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, in which he said, you know, we could use the full extent of the law to prosecute people for supposedly saying unlawful things on social media, but it wouldn't be in the public interest to do so because it would have a chilling effect on free speech. It would cause huge anxiety amongst people and inhibit them and stop them from, you know, saying perfectly lawful things on social media for fear of being arrested and punished. And I think that's what we're seeing now. He appears to have changed his mind. But yeah, it's typical, I think, of the government to blame misinformation and disinformation, social media, Elon Musk for the recent disturbances, when, you know, that's not the real cause, as any sensible person knows. And it's typical, actually, of how governments try and scapegoat the messenger whenever you have an outbreak of public disorder. So during the Brixton riots in 2005, Patrick, pirate radio was blamed as the cause. During the 2011 riots, which were much more serious than the recent disturbances we've seen, people tried to blame BlackBerry Messenger. You know, it's convenient for governments to blame these scapegoats rather than grapple with the real issue, which is, you know, seething public anger over uncontrolled mass immigration over the past few decades.
But look, there is also something that stands out to me about this, which is that let's just take at face value that this is a man who was running a pretty marginal news channel in Lahore or somewhere like that. There is this idea now that he's been arrested for something like cyber terrorism. All right. This is by the Pakistani authorities, who were unable to detect Osama bin Laden living about 5 miles away from their main military base. But this chap has tweeted something that some people in this country have latched onto, and then, I will say this again, some of them have gone on to do absolutely deplorable things. But that guy is now in custody with the Pakistani authorities. And again, does this not all just seem a little bit much?
It does seem a little bit much. And I think, you know, I looked this up beforehand, and it looks as though under the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act, which was passed in Pakistan in 2022, this man could be facing 3 to 5 years in jail for spreading fake news. And that law was passed in order to enable the political class to suppress criticism of their regime. And it's looking increasingly as though Britain, which used to be, you know, a model, a beacon of freedom and democracy, is now following in the footsteps of a country like Pakistan, with people being banged up in jail for, you know, sharing memes on Facebook. It's, this government has taken a really sinister authoritarian turn over the last few weeks. And the Free Speech Union, Patrick, has never signed up more members. We signed up more members in a single hour on Thursday than we did for the whole of July. People are terrified now that they're going to, get a knock on their door from the police for something they've said on Twitter or Facebook months ago. For the most part, you know, they've been in touch with us. They've asked us about it because they're worried. These are mild criticisms of the government, perfectly reasonable complaints about uncontrolled mass immigration, but they're now terrified that they're going to have their collars felt and may end up in jail for saying these things. It's having an unbelievably chilling effect on free speech in this country, and Britain is effectively becoming more and more like Pakistan by the day.
Well, and there appears to be, in this case, a slightly bizarre link as well, doesn't there? But, Toby, thank you very, very much, as ever. That's Toby Youngnose, the General Secretary of Free Speech Union. I just want to make something very clear again. I'm not saying that it's right or OK to put misinformation out. I'm certainly not saying it's right or OK to look at any misinformation and then go and behave like a complete animal. What I am saying is, do you not think this is getting a little bit ridiculous that a random bloke in Lahore is now on cyber terrorism charges, and people who shared some of that information here are now basically being blamed for the entire riots? I just find that's a little bit odd. But anyway, coming up, I'll bring you some exclusive Tory leadership polling that exposes the disdain that Tory members hold for their parliamentary party. So not great, is it? Plus, I'll show you the dramatic escape attempt of these two UK drug smugglers.
Stop the rip! Stop the rip now!
That's next, after I bring you the very first look at tomorrow's front pages. Let's do it.
Hi there, time for the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. An unsettled 36 to 48 hour period to come for many parts of the UK. A series of low-pressure systems queuing up to arrive from the Atlantic. One heading towards Iceland, another one containing the remnants of ex-Hurricane Ernesto. That means, although it's a fairly typical area of low pressure that we see in the North Atlantic at this time of year, it does contain air of tropical origins and a lot of moisture. All that moisture will be dumped over western Scotland, northwest England, parts of Wales and Northern Ireland overnight. And the winds will pick up as well, with gales, 50 to 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts around the Irish Sea coast first thing Thursday, as well as the hills of North Wales, Northern England and southern Scotland could cause some transport disruption during the Thursday morning period. Drier towards the southeast, a lot of cloud around and a breezy start to the day, but the wet weather pushing into southwest England, Wales and northwest Scotland, and having dumped 100 to 150 millimetres of rain over the hills of western Scotland, there's the risk of disruption during Thursday morning, even as that clears away the risk of localised flooding. Now, brighter skies do return to Scotland and Northern Ireland, although with a scattering of showers moving in from the west, whilst the frontal system pushes southeastwards as a weakening feature. No more than a few dribs and drabs of rain by the time it gets to the southeast of England on Thursday afternoon. Otherwise, sunshine late on across Wales, the Midlands and Northern England, but the same can't be said for Friday. A very unsettled start to the day, wet and windy once again as another low moves across the UK. It does pull through quickly and brighter skies once again into the afternoon, but with further showers coming into the northwest, and that sets the scene for the bank holiday weekend. Now, for England, Wales and Northern Ireland, it is a bank holiday and we can expect a mix of sunny spells and showers.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back, everybody. I've got a big exclusive coming your way on the Tory leadership election, but before that, here are your front pages. We start with the Daily Telegraph. Alzheimer's wonder drug is given the go-ahead. This is a game-changing breakthrough. It can slow cognitive decline by up to 27%, apparently. They also say Labour jobs tax looms after £5 billion surge in borrowing. Let's go to The Guardian now. UK police threaten extraditions to tackle sextortion criminals. So this is the National Crime Agency, apparently, is warning foreign cyber criminals that could seek to extradite them. They could seek to extradite them as part of a crackdown to tackle the alarming numbers of young people being targeted for sextortion. This is blackmailing people over sexual images. Apparently, these gangs tend to be based in West Africa, according to this report, and they are going to extradite those people to the UK, apparently. Anyway, right, let's go to the Daily Mail. Super yacht Hope lost as divers find 5 bodies. Yeah, look, I was actually on air earlier when this story was breaking, and yeah, tycoon Mike Lynch and his daughter are thought to be amongst those who were discovered in the wreckage of that yacht after a desperate 3-day search. Let's go to the Eye. Labour has no real plan to fix the UK sewage crisis, Fergal Sharkey is warning. Apparently, he is saying that the government needs to have a clear and decisive strategy to save Britain's polluted rivers. It is the classic, isn't it? Now they're in charge, everything is their fault, and even Fergal Sharkey's having a pop at you. So, Daily Express. Divers find bodies of Tycoon and his daughter. So they have, yeah, they've gone off on that story again. They're desperately sad. Now, the Metro, here's one. Freedom of the Swiftie. As Taylor Swift gives Britain a £1 billion economic boost, an MP is calling for Taylor Swift to be given the freedom of the City of London. So there we are, an eclectic mix on the front pages. But I have teased you about this long enough. I'm going to hand over to our very own Mark Littlewood, who is, of course, on the panel with us tonight, who in just a second or two is going to run you through this in more detail. But we can exclusively bring you the latest Tory leadership polling done by the Popular Conservatives. So, Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch remain neck and neck on 28%, while Priti Patel remains solid on 17%. Mel Stride, Tom Tugendhat and James Cleverly all polled under 5% with members surveyed. Now, in campaign cut-through terms, the clear winner is Robert Jenrick, with almost 58% of panellists satisfied or very satisfied with this campaign, while all other candidates scored less than 40%. However, in a sign of growing discontent between the Conservative Parliamentary Party and its own members, an overwhelming majority of 76% have little or no confidence in Tory MPs putting the right two final candidates to the membership. Mark, you're in part responsible for this. Go on.
I am. My outfit's responsible for this. We're trying to get to the bottom of what party members think about the leadership race. Important to underscore that for your viewers, Patrick. We're only asking Conservative Party members because it is they who will have the final say. The MPs will cut it down to 2 out of these 6. God only knows which 2 they'll pick. I was discussing with a former cabinet minister early today, and we were postulating that you might find all 6 candidates get about 20 MPs each voting for them. So God only knows how they'll get it down to the final 2. If you believe the betting markets, then the 2 that we have top of our poll, Jenrick and Badenoch, have the best chance of winning. The betting markets say it's about 60% likely that it'll be one of those 2, but we'll see. But I think the interesting thing was this gap between the party membership and the MPs. This 76% of our 500 or so members surveyed saying little or no confidence that the MPs will select the right 2 for the final ballot. That's when the members get a say. And this is what I think is going to happen, Patrick. The campaign's not really caught light yet. In fairness, we're still in the dog days of August. I think this will be a bigger political story in September. The Conservative Party conference will be in the midst of this. That will be a right jamboree with everybody trying to curry support. But once the MPs have nailed it down to the final 2, whoever they pick, whether it's Priti Patel, Kemi Badenoch, Jenrick, Mel Stride even, those 2 are then going to have to appeal to the Conservative Party membership base. And here is, I think, another interesting statistic from the poll. We asked these 500 Tory members, what's the policy issue you care about most? And 55% said immigration. 24% said the economy. Once these 6 MPs have spoken to their 100 or so colleagues and 2 of them are left standing, they are going to have a decent platform to appeal to the party membership on those 2 issues.
Right, well, there is quite a lot to digest there, I suppose. So, Suzanne, I'll throw it your way first. What do you make of that, then? Do you think that the Tory MPs will make the right decision, whatever that is?
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because I think for a long time there's been a disconnect between a lot of the One Nation so-called Conservatives, some of us might call us the more wet, liberal Conservatives in MPs, and the kind of harder centre-right MPs, which mostly is the membership view in my experience. Most Conservatives want low tax, small state, low immigration, and yet you seem to have a House of Commons MPs in the Conservative Party who don't really seem to be fully signed up to that and are more kind of social democratic in their approach. So it will be interesting, and I suspect the parliamentary party may very well split. So you might get them plumping for, say, Robert Jenrick or Priti or Kemi, and then Tom Tugendhat as well, who would represent that wing of the party. And then I think it will be a very clear-cut decision for the Conservative Party membership. Of course, if you get, say, I think most dream ticket for most Conservative Party members would be a choice between Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick. Because then whoever wins, I think the Conservative Party will be taken in a different direction.
Now, obviously, Rebecca, I don't imagine you massively care.
I mean, that never stops me from saying something, does it?
No, but you know, I suppose the way to phrase this question would be, Who do you think would be worst for Keir Starmer out of the candidates there? If you just, in a world where
most annoying or most actually problematic, because I think those two things are different.
Most problematic.
If I were a Conservative voter, first of all, I would give myself a long, hard look in the mirror. But after I was done doing that, I would want somebody who was going to focus on, getting the party match fit again. So really bringing in new talent, getting excited about it, finding what made us a good team back in the early days of perhaps David Cameron, and re-embracing that. What I want to avoid is somebody who's just going to pick on sort of scratchy, headliney culture war stuff, because I'm not sure that's actually going to make them any better or any richer as a party.
OK. Interesting point. You'll be, I don't know, surprised, possibly appalled, Rebecca, to know that many Conservative Party members agree with you.
No, I think lots of Conservative parties aren't awful.
Actually, one of the things a lot of Conservative Party members seem to want is substantial reform of the party itself. This won't catch light with the electorate, who aren't really interested in what the constitutional protocols of the Conservative and Unionist Party is. But if you want to appeal to the party membership, you are going to have to really turn around the Tory party. We had all sorts of undemocratic fixes and cronyist practices on selecting candidates.
But they were fighting fires, weren't they? So there wasn't time and space to look at that.
Well, they had a year or so to select some.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so I think democratic reform of the party and actually giving members more of a say in who their Conservative candidate is would help the party get match fit, and that's certainly what the members want.
So just to clarify, as it currently stands, according to your poll, the most popular two with the membership are
Jenrick and Badenoch.
And they are almost neck and neck.
Yeah, and Priti Patel not far behind.
Priti Patel not far behind, right, all to play for. So there we go. Well, thank you very much for bringing us that. Fascinating stuff. But I also want to bring in now a dramatic moment that two drug smugglers tried to escape the police after being caught with no less than £37 million worth of cocaine off the coast of Suffolk.
Stand down, you've been warned.
So there we go. 55-year-old Bruce Knowles and 31-year-old Dutchman, Furhart unpronounceable surname, were intercepted by Border Force near East Bannock Broads in Suffolk. It's a tough one, this. With 350 kilograms of cocaine in the hull of their boat. They pleaded guilty at Ipswich Crown Court yesterday, and they are now facing a lengthy prison sentence. So there we go. So it does appear that Border Force can stop someone.
They can stop them. I found myself rooting for him. I thought, if you want it that badly, get away.
I think when he really kind of splashed himself over the side, the other guy was a bit half, wasn't he? He was like, I think I'm probably not going to get away. I'll have a run through the shoreline. And then
just for show.
Just for show. But the other guy really committed to it, didn't he? But 37 million quid's worth of cocaine. But anyway, that's off the streets now to be replaced immediately by another 37 million worth of cocaine. But coming up, who said the Germans don't have a sense of humour, eh? Yes, I will tell you exactly what's going on there, but first I'll bring you some more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages, so stay tuned.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
A new 9-storey high mural celebrating Jewish life in Britain's capital has been unveiled in Finchley Road. The mural's artist, Leon Fenster, joins me now. Leon, welcome to GB News. Congratulations on the work. Tell me a little bit about the concept and how you put it together.
Well, all of my artworks are essentially storytelling. So trying to pull back the curtain on some specific world that I can reveal, whether that's the world of a particular family, of a community, of an organisation, of a city. And in this case, the challenge was how to depict in a single artwork the entire story of Jews in the city of London. I don't really plan too much. I start somewhere, one thing leads to the next, to the next, to the next, the way we remember the world in our dreams and our memories. And then after a few months, it was ready, and we put it up onto the wall.
Give me an idea of the dimensions of this thing. We've talked about it being 7 stories high.
Right.
It also looks like it's pretty broad.
The wall is 14 metres wide, and it's to the top of the artwork is 26 metres. So definitely my largest yet, I would say.
I didn't know Benjamin Disraeli had a bar mitzvah.
He did not. He made a point of not having one. These artworks, there's this kind of mischievous sense of humour.
Oh.
So actually, Benjamin Disraeli's father left Bevis Mark Synagogue after an argument and immediately had his children baptised.
Yes.
Just a couple of months before Benjamin Disraeli's bar mitzvah would have been. So I'm sort of slightly cheekily imagining him finally getting to have the bar mitzvah he never had. He might not be too happy about this, to be honest.
Because after all, Benjamin Disraeli would not have been Prime Minister in that era.
Quite.
Has he been willing to attest to the Church of England?
That's right, absolutely. So that's why there's something slightly cheeky about it. Exactly.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. I've got a couple more front pages for you, so here we go. So we're going to start this one with the Times. Interesting story on the Times here, right, actually at the top of it. Free movement for the under-30s in reset of EU relationships. So apparently ministers are prepared to allow young Europeans to live and work in Britain as part of a wider reset of relations with Brussels after Brexit. I'm going to talk about that in more detail in a second. I'll just round off this paper review with The Mirror, which is a desperately awful story, actually. Merman, 3 kids killed in house blaze. Horror. Tributes to family as a man is arrested over the suspected arson attack. Absolutely devastating, and the picture on the front there is the young mother with 3 incredibly young children. So just such an awful story. I'll focus this one on what's on the Times now, though. So free movement for the under-30s and a reset of EU relationships. Apparently Labour has reportedly insisted it has no plans to agree to a youth mobility scheme that could give young members of the EU the right to work in the UK for the first time since Brexit. But government sources have told The Times that ministers had recognised that they would have to give ground on this issue. All right, OK, so let's be honest, it's a bit squiffy on the detail here. But do we think this is likely to happen? Free movement for the under-30s?
I don't know if it's likely to happen. I hope it doesn't. I think it's very weird to pick a particular cohort, EU citizens under the age of 30, and to have a separate immigration policy for them. Our immigration policy and whether you can live and work here should be based on the work that you're doing or the tax contribution that you make, or that you can prove that you're self-sufficient because you've got adequate wealth and you won't be relying on the state. A particular carve-out for this particular cohort is not the way to have a sensible policy.
I also wonder if it would be reciprocal as well.
It would have to be reciprocal.
This is one of the great unknowns.
It would have to be, but I totally agree with Mark. I mean, it's an ageist policy to start with. It's a complete ripping up the Brexit contract that we had. No, I think this is an absolute disaster, really. As Mark says, you know, the under-30s are going to be people who are going to be on lower incomes, who are less likely to be able to contribute to the UK economy, are probably going to need some handouts in order to be able to stay here. It's a complete disaster. And this idea that, oh, we've got no plans, say Labour, well, how many times have we heard in all manner of things? We have no plans.
Well,
that is the political threat. That's the sign that they're thinking about it seriously.
Quite an interesting sentence in this article is, under this move, EU citizens under the age of 30 would be allowed to live and work in the UK for up to 3 years, with a reciprocal arrangement for the UK citizens. No, it says this. This would bring the EU in line with countries such as Canada and Australia, which already have a similar deal with the UK. So I suppose when you look at it like that, what's the problem?
Yeah, and I think it's a really nice thing. I think I've got a lot of friends who are really, really heartbroken not to be able to live in countries that they particularly wanted to. However, I think there is a bit of a flaw here that we already have a problem with people not having enough babies. And if people leave to go to, let's say, live in Amsterdam when they're 27, meet somebody, they find out how much better it is to have children in other European countries, which is true almost universally of other EU states, they will not come back here and have more babies, and then that is going to be a whole new problem.
Any points against that, do you think? Was that fair?
Well, I don't know. I think we have got a birth crisis. There's no doubt about that, and that needs to be looked at. You know, and there's a very strong argument made by some people that the reason our birth rate is so low is why we need immigration. I don't think that follows at all.
Well, I think it's part of the housing crisis.
And
damn near impossible for young people to get on the housing ladder.
Also, part of the problem is that people have fewer children now, but new builds tend to be 3 beds rather than 4 beds. So you literally move into a house which facilitates you having like a 1 bedroom for a child.
That's again because of the strict planning controls. I mean, housing is is much, much cheaper in Europe.
I
That makes
genuinely
family formation much easier.
If you made it easier to do extensions to people's houses, got rid of planning permission, people would have more babies because they'd have someone to put the baby.
We're united on liberalising planning laws.
Yeah,
Save the nation.
free movement for the under-30s in reset of EU relationships. I just don't quite understand why they would allow us and why we would accept. I mean, what are we resetting? What, better trade deals? I mean, is this the other aspect of this would just be it's a backdoor?
Well, it's a backdoor to free movement. It's the first step in free movement. So then does it become the under-40s, the under-50s, the under-80s, the whole lot. So if you want free movement, this is a step back towards it. That was part of the reason for leaving.
This is the worry that people like me who voted for Brexit have long had, that there will be a stealth moves piecemeal to get back in.
But I think a lot of people would really like the right to live somewhere else and work somewhere else. I think if it's reciprocal and you can do it on a country-by-country basis, I think it's a really nice option to offer people.
By the way, it could be unilateral. I don't think that you need to make these things reciprocal. We could pick off nations that we were happy to unilaterally offer this to. We don't need to sign a treaty to bring this about.
OK, all right, well, we watch this space, don't we? Now, on a similar-ish vein, the Germans are coming. Well, I mean, they're already here, actually, and their navy are causing quite a scene. One of the German warships made its presence known in London today by blaring out the Darth Vader theme tune as it advanced up the River Thames. One thing I will say about that is that it does appear to have divided a bit of opinion on the panel here. We had a bit of laughter, and then we...
Does that count as far-right protesters, imperial stormtroopers?
I suppose it does imply, why do you think you might have the need to play the Darth Vader?
It's got a far-right vibe, hasn't it? Like vintage far-right, like the original far-right.
Remember the Nazis?
Yeah, like the first wave of Nazis.
More like a far-left vibe, actually, if you're talking about the Nazis.
The Nazis were far right.
Oh, come on, Nationalist Socialist Party, Rebecca, come off it. Of course they were. They were big state. They were absolutely totalitarian.
We'll be honest with you, it was supposed to be a lie-art segment. We are now currently having a massive row about the Nazis and, going proof as to why you should never bring up the war. But apparently they always play that song, which again I think is weird. I find this whole thing very weird. I must say I found it quite funny initially. A German Navy spokesperson told the Telegraph, I won't do the accent, the commander can choose the music freely. The choice of music has no deeper message, all right? Well, I, for one, am reassured. So, there we go. Who said the Germans didn't have a sense of humour?
They have a sense of humour. It's just a really weird sense of humour.
It's a weird one, yeah. All right, OK, let's do today's greatest Britain Union jackass. Right, Mark, who's your greatest Britain, please?
I'm going to pick Sven-Göran Eriksson, the former England manager, first foreigner to manage an England national football team. Yep. He is sadly dying of cancer, but he's actually doing so with an unbelievably phlegmatic and philosophical approach. There's a documentary coming out about him. He's got a smile on his face. Look, when I go, I want to die peacefully in my sleep like my grandfather, not scared and terrified like his passengers, as you know. But if you do have a long time to go, I'm not sure I could come to terms with it as philosophically as he had. He's brought a lot of joy to the nation, and he seems to be going out in the best way possible. Good luck to him.
OK, all right. Suzanne, who's your greatest Britain, please?
So mine is Metropolitan Police Special Constable Ned Donovan. He's also Roald Dahl's grandson, and he rushed to assist a tourist who was being robbed on Westminster Bridge, but got beaten up in the process, unfortunately. But good on him for being a one-man, mean, lean fighting machine, attacking the criminals. Shame, though, on the bystanders who didn't help him, just stood by filming it on their phones, which is a sad indictment, I think, of 21st century Britain.
It's a classic of the genre, unfortunately, isn't it? Rebecca, who's your greatest Britain, please?
Mine is Maria Banyas Morea. I butchered her name, but she was the oldest person in the world until she sadly died this week. But she was 117 years old, and if you could listen to an interview with her, she's so great, she's so chill. She's like, I didn't do anything special, I just stayed alive. Oh. I love her. I think she's great.
Good stuff. Well, you know what? This is incredibly difficult to choose, actually. I have decided to go for Ned Donovan, the police officer who put himself in the line of duty. So although any of them could have won, Any of them could have won. Right, so who's going to be your union jackass?
I'm going for Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. I'm sick and tired of hearing all this. We've opened the books and discovered new numbers. The numbers were in the public domain anyway. She's now making the public finances much worse by signing off deals with trade unions without any reciprocation. I fear that we are just going to go further and faster down high tax, high spend, high debt under this regime.
OK, Suzanne.
So it's the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals in Wales. It is niche. But they have told librarians that they should avoid holding meetings in racist buildings. Yes, they've made a list of dozens of buildings that they say have got links to slavery and colonialism and say they should be boycotted. Racist buildings, absolutely stark, raving bonkers.
There we go. Right, go on then, Rebecca.
Right, the nation will be furious with you if you don't pick this one. Elaine Delon, the actor who died, in his will, he wanted his 10-year-old, very healthy dog put down so that it could be buried with him.
What?
Yeah, he wanted his dog euthanised so they could be buried together.
His dying wish was to kill his dog.
Yeah, perfectly healthy, gorgeous-looking dog, actually. Very nice dog.
Presumably.
Sorry?
That's not being honest.
No, because they were like, no, mate, you're dead. I'm not killing your dog.
The family rejected it, apparently, so there we go. Rachel Reeves is today's union jackass, although that dog thing...
Oh, you don't love dogs,
Thank you. I'll see you guys...
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, time for the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. An unsettled 36 to 48-hour period to come for many parts of the UK. A series of low-pressure systems queuing up to arrive from the Atlantic. One heading towards Iceland, another one containing the remnants of ex-Hurricane Ernesto. That means, although it's a fairly typical area of low pressure that we see in the North Atlantic at this time of year, it does contain air of tropical origins and a lot of moisture. All that moisture will be dumped over western Scotland, northwest England, parts of Wales and Northern Ireland overnight. And the winds will pick up as well with gales, 50 to 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts around the Irish Sea coast first thing Thursday, as well as the hills of North Wales, Northern England and southern